Do you think $100 an hour is possible at 5-5, 1,000 cap, low stakes poker?
Yes, possible always.
Do you think I, over the next several hundred hours, will make $100 an hour playing 5-5, 1,000 cap?
No.
Let's rewind a second. That's me, Marc Goone, and I'm playing low stakes to prove to our students, and Nikki and Caitlin, that $100 an hour is possible at 5-5. In this episode, I play 2 sessions at the world-famous Hustler Casino, Oprah Winfrey's favorite place to play poker, and try to prove that with the right mix of exploits, 20 big blinds an hour may just be possible. Can I keep the run good going? Can I prove the poker internet wrong? Can eating bananas in this way give me a superpower? Let's find out.
Down bad, bounce back, boy, I'm different. Watch how I handle my business. Watch with the hands not ticking. Listen, that's that drum kick, boom, coming out of my system.
All right, first hand here at Hustler. It is a double board POLO bomb pot. And we have pocket aces with queen 5. Board 1 comes ace jack 10. So we flop top set, but there is a flush draw out there. And board 2 is king queen 5. So we flop bottom 2 pair and top set. We are under the gun, so we are going to check our entire range here. Is this my MO in these bomb pots? And the low jack is going to bet 75. Now the cutoff is going to call. And I would say if board number 1 did not have a straight out there, or there was not a flush draw, either of those being true, I'd probably just start piling in money here with a strong hand on both boards. But because we don't have the nuts on either, and a flush could come out on board 1, I just want to see a safe turn here before we start piling in money when we're out of position and the nuts can change on both boards so frequently. So we are going to call 3 ways to the turn, pot being 350, 4 of clubs up top, not great for us, and a deuce of clubs down below. We are going to check, and this is going to be a pretty crappy spot if a lot of action here happens on the turn, but it does check through. We go to the river, which is a jack up top, so now we have aces full and a blank 4 of spades down below, so still 2 pair. Pot being 350, we come out and pot here, and now the low jack jams for approximately $860, and we don't love this because when the low jack bets the flop, checks back the turn, and now wakes up on the river with this jam, it seems like he's probably just playing the top board like we are. And when we have aces, well, he's not doing this if he has a hand like jack 10 or pocket 10s. Like, people just play these spots very passively in bomb pots. So it seems like he has the nuts on the top board to me a lot of the time. There are 2 combos of ace jack out there, but there's also 1 combo of jack, so I'm already not loving it because to me it feels like he's playing the top board. If he was playing the bottom board, he just would have continued betting on the turn here. And so now the cutoff calls as well. If the cutoff had a hand like pocket kings or pocket queens or something like that, he would probably just bet on the turn when it checked to him. So it seems to me like the cutoff either has a full house on the top board or the king high flush draw or something like that. At this point, once the cutoff calls, he's got about $80 behind. So we're going to shove for his last $80 and try to get that money from him. He's going to call. And just like we thought, the low jack wins the top board with pocket jack. So he's got quads, and we win the bottom with queen 5, and we actually scoop the cutoff in the side pot. So we win that extra $80, which is nice. Play double board PLO bomb pots. They are good for your win rate. All right, next hand here, the straddle is on. We are in the low jack with king queen off. We raise to $40, and only the straddle is going to call. And I ask him,
you sure? Yes. Okay. You really want to.
Double ace.
Double ace?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good hand.
well, he says he's got aces here, seems unlikely. Flop is king, king, deuce. So we flop trips here, and I'm going to choose a size, single raise pot, heads up in position where they hopefully raise off their strong stuff, call with their weak stuff, half pot. He is going to call. Turn is a 9. He checks it over. I think this is super interesting because usually on most turns, when I think players are capped, I like to go with the very big size on turns, but I'm actually going to size down here because on a paired dried board, he may not fast play all of his his trips. So I think at this point, by going small, I get to keep in hands like pocket eights, and I can entice him to raise off occasionally when he does have a hand like king 10 or something like that. So I go 50, he's going to call. We're going to the river, which is an offsuit jack. He checks it over, and now at this point, I'm just targeting the case king here that did not raise on the flop or the turn, and I am going to go 400. I actually think this is one of those spots where the good value size is either very, very big or very, very small. And the ideal bluff size, probably somewhere in the middle. If we just bet like $110, $120 here, I think we get pocket eights, pocket sevens, pocket fives, all that stuff to fold. So I actually go big here, targeting the case king. Unfortunately for us, he is going to fold. All right, next hand here, we're in the low jack. We open ace 10 off to $25. The hijack and the button are going to call. So we go 3 ways to the flop, which comes king, queen, 9. And as is my MO, with multiple players in position to us, I think this board is likely to get stabbed. I'm just going to be checking my entire range here, both my good hands, my bad hands, and everything in between when everybody's in position to us. So I check and it checks through. Turn now is in 8. Now the low jack goes $20 and the button calls. When both of these players check back on the flop on a pretty wet dynamic flop, they're going to be capped. The best hand they're going to have here at any reasonable frequency is probably going to be a queen X type holding. So I am going to pounce. I'm going to put in the check raise right now. I go $180 and both of them are going to fold. We get it through and we are just printing here with the red line. All right, next hand here, the EP and cutoff players limp. We look down at pocket Kiglies and make it $35 on the button. The small blind and the EP and cutoff limpers are going to call. So we're going 4 ways to the flop, which comes ace, ace, jack, checks all the way around to us. And I am not sure we are going to get much action on this board. Even if we do have the best hand, I think we have a 2-street hand here. So we are going to check this back multi-way. If this was heads up, I would just be c-betting, but we're going to check it back multi-way. Turn is the 6 of spades. The small blind and the EP player are going to check. The cutoff's going to come out and bet 65. Small bet here, less than half pot. So we are going to call. Both other players are going to fold. Heads up to the river, which is a 7. Now the cutoff bets $70. And I think we have a very, very easy continue here. The question is, can we actually click this and raise for value? Trying to get value from a hand like king jack or queen jack or something like that. Actually, I think this is like a really, really good spot to bluff, because I think he just never has a strong hand, and that if he does even have a hand as strong as like queen jack here or king jack here, I think if we breathe on this, if we just raise to any amount, I think a jack X will fold. So I think it may be a little thin. Maybe I could try to click this and literally just make it $140, because I think we always have the best hand here. But I actually, in game, I like to call, and pocket kings is good. All right, next hand here, we raise to $25 in the low jack with king, queen of spades. Cutoff button and big blind calls. So we're going 4 ways to a flop, which is pretty nice. Jack 10, 6 with a couple of spades out there. So we flop a monster combo draw. Checks over to us in the low jack, and with multiple players in position to us on a jack high wet dynamic board, I expect this board to get stabbed at a high frequency. I would like to put in a big check raise here and pile in all of the money very quickly. So we go for a check here, but unfortunately it's going to check through. Turn is now a king, so we make top pair to go along with our big draw. Now the big blind leads for $40 into 100. No real reason to raise here. One of the mistakes I see a lot of low stakes players make is just turning top pair plus flush draw into a bluff for absolutely no discernible reason. I think we could have the best hand here at a very high frequency. So we're going to call. Everybody else folds. Heads up to the river, which is an offsuit 9. So now we have a straight, and when this player checks it over to us, I just want to make sure we get value here from a king. I think if he did have 2 pair, he would just size bigger on the turn. If he had a hand like king jack or king 10 or jack 10 or something like that, I think he would just choose a bigger size on the turn. I think his most likely holding is going to be a hand like king X suited, calling from the big blind here, so like a king 5 suited type hand. So I actually want to go pretty small. I just don't think he has 2 pair all that often. I guess king 9 is possible, but I don't think he has sets. I don't think he has king jack, king 10, whatever. So I go small here. I go $60. He calls and we win. All right, next hand here, low jack post. So there's $10 dead out there. EP limps, the low jack checks, hijack limps as well. And we ISO here in the cutoff with ace 3 of spades to $50. The button calls, and now the small blind, who is on the tighter side, squeezes to $100. 135. Now this is a small size, but also when players 3-bet from the blinds, they're just massively under bluffing. So I think this is going to be a very strong range. He's given us a very good price, and we don't like that if we call, the button's going to come in. We're going to have to play monkey in the middle, but I don't like 4-betting a hand that is this weak up against a very, very strong range. So we are going to call. Button comes along as well. Flop comes ace 8-5 with a couple of hearts, so we flop top pair. Checks over to us. So I think it's most likely the small blind probably has a hand like kings, queens, jacks, something like that. If he did have a hand like ace king, he would just come out and bet here, almost always on a board that's wet and dynamic. Our hand, I'm not sure this hand is good enough to get 3 streets ever here in a 3-bet pot on this particular board. So we're going to check. Now the button goes 185, small bet here. The small blind calls, so everything checks out so far. I think the small blind probably has kings, queens, jacks, something like that. And top pair, we are not folding right away to a small bet on the flop, even with one caller. So we are going to call as well. Turn is a 7 of spades, bringing in a backdoor flush draw. Small blind checks, we check, and now the button checks back, so we think we just have the best hand at a pretty high frequency here. River is an offsuit 4. Now the small blind comes out and bets 320 into 975. This to me just feels like a monkey bet, like I don't know what to do with my pocket queen, so I'm going to come out and bet. Don't think this player has ace king at all taking this line. I think ace king obviously would just come out and bet the flop on a board that has all types of draws on it. So we are going to call here. The button is going to fold, and we win versus pocket 10s. All right, next hand here, just a really good example of being efficient with our bluff sizes. EP is going to limp. We ISO here in the hijack with king jack of hearts. Now the cutoff, who is a recreational player, but more on the aggressive side, is going to 3-bet us to $135. We start off this hand relatively deep, and we've got a suited Broadway, so we're going to call. If this was a typical, more passive recreational player, I would just fold, but we are in there, so we're gonna call. Heads up. Flop comes 7-6-4 with 2 clubs, and we're just done with this if he stabs, but we check it over, and he actually checks it back. So we think at this point he probably just has a lot of ace king, ace queen type holdings. I think a lot of his overpairs would probably just bet off on this flop. Now, to be fair, this guy is aware. He knows this board is not that great for him as a pre-flop 3-better, and he may check back occasionally here with a hand like pocket aces or pocket kings. We go the turn, which is an offsuit 9, and at this point I want to choose a size that is going to entice a hand like ace king or ace queen to call. I think if I go too big here, those hands will just fold, and hands like pocket aces or pocket kings will be the only part of his range that continues, which is not what we want. So I go very small here. I just go 90, 1/3 pot, and he is going to call. River is now a 9 pairing the board, and once again I just want to choose a size on this river now that is going to get ace king and ace queen to fold. We kept those hands in on the turn. Now let's get them to fold on the river. So I go 190 here into 460.
What do you have?
I have what all Rex have. Which means I'm not in the folding mood,
Oh,
regardless of what I have.
I got 7-8 of hearts.
He's going to tank for a couple minutes, but finally he is going to find the fold, and we get it through with king high. All right, next hand, we buy the button here. So we are the big blind and the small blind, I guess you could say. Low jack is going to make it $25. The cutoff and button call. We look down at ace king, standard squeeze spot for us. We make it 150. Only the low jack is going to call. We are heads up to a flop, which comes 10-4-4 with a couple of clubs. My MO out of position in 3-bet pots, unless the player is super, super passive or we are super, super short stack. I'm just going to be checking range here because in general, when you check to recreational players, they overstab, telegraph their hand strength with their bet sizing, and do not protect their check back range. So I check, and he actually goes pretty small here, 125. I think ace king high can still be good here a lot of the time, so we are going to call. Now the turn is a queen of spades, so there are clubs and there are spades out there. We check, and he jams all in for about 400 here. This is a little suspicious to me because I do think if he had a 10 on the flop, or even a hand like pocket 9s or pocket jacks or something like that, that he would just size bigger on the flop. So I'm actually a little bit suspicious. He seems super comfortable. I am just going to give him credit, and I fold here, and he actually shows the 4 of diamonds here and says he had a high hand, which means he possibly had pocket 4s in this spot, which does make some sense on why he would go small on the flop. So even though I was a little bit curious on the turn with the overall sizing he took, checks out, makes sense, and glad we were able to get away from this one. All right, next hand here, just another example of why bet sizing tells can be so important to pay attention to against recreational players who are often just telling you their hand strength with their bet sizing. We open pocket fives from early position to $25. The hijack and the small blind calls 3 ways to the flop, which comes queen, 4, deuce with a couple of hearts. Small blind checks, we are going to check here with kind of a showdown value-y hand, and the hijack is going to go 25, which is a very small size, and when the small blind gets out of the way, I think we can just have the best hand here a lot of the time. So we're going to call. Turn is now a deuce, pairing the bottom card. We check, he checks it back. River is a 4, and 5's, I think, a little bit too thin here. We are just not going to get called by worse. So I check, and he snap bets $100, and this size to me just feels like value. I think if he had a flush draw, he would either continue betting on the turn, or he would choose a smaller size here on the river. I think if he had a queen, that he would actually just size up on the flop. So this to me feels like a 4, and specifically a 4.
I don't think I'm putting in any more money. I don't think I am. I already gave you 300, so
Yeah.
you're still ahead.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fold it. That's good. At a 4.
All right, next hand here, under the gun is going to limp. Low jack ISOs to 20, small ISO size, couple of conflicting things going on here. Players don't ISO enough, so even the fact that they just raised it all from early to middle position seems relatively strong over limp. But just in general, if you think they have top of range, if they notice the limp, they're probably going to choose a bigger size here. So my MO, 3-bet, play pots heads up in position against recreational players. So we go $60 here with 9s in the hijack. Now the button is going to cold call, and the low jack, the original raiser, is going to come along as well. So 3 ways to a flop, which comes 8-8-4. Pot being 190. Low jack now donks for $35. And this is going to be a weird spot here if we call. We're kind of monkey in the middle here. I would just like to raise. I'm just going to ignore this donk bet. I'm going to pretend this is the check because the donk is so small. Since we are in the middle, I would just be betting off myself with 1 player in position, 1 player out of position, not expecting this flop to get stabbed all that much. So we're just going to raise here to $105, and the button is going to fold. Now the low jack is going to call. Now the turn is a beautiful 9 of spades, so we make top full house, and now the low jack comes out and donks for $40 again, and I say,
What is this tiny bet shit? I want you to raise.
and at this point, I'm not getting paid if this guy does have a hand like 6s or 7s here at all, but I do want to maximize value and start piling in money. If he does have an ace-high flush draw, if he does have a hand as strong as like 10s or jacks here sometime, I want to make the max against those hands, so I'm going to start putting in money here. I raise to 300, just thinking like a hand like pocket jacks is never folding. Ace queen of clubs here is never folding, but unfortunately for us, he is going to think about it, and he is going to find a fold.
We're here with Nikki and Caitlin. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
Do you guys think,
No. We'd never think. We just do.
do you think $100 an hour is possible at 5-5, 1,000 cap, low stakes poker?
Yes, possible always.
I don't know. How am I doing emotionally that day?
Well, it wouldn't be for you, just in general.
Yeah.
Oh, like, is it possible?
Yeah, it's possible.
I've met many a great man.
It's like, is it possible to win $1 billion at the California State Lotto? Yeah,
It's possible.
it's possible.
Possible.
Do you think I, over the next several hundred hours, will make $100 an hour playing 5-5, 1,000 cap?
Are you playing today?
No.
Then no.
Thank you.
I'm allowed to be here. I was invited.
De nada.
All right, next hand here. You guys have asked for more examples of how I play these ace-high boards and single raise pots in position, and by you guys, I mean me, myself. No one has asked me that except me, but I'm gonna give you guys this hand anyway. So EP limps, we ISO to $35 in the low jack with 10-8 of hearts. The cutoff is going to call. Now the big blind's going to call. We're 3 ways to the flop, ace jack 7, and even if this was heads up, I am not c-betting these ace-high boards, single raise pots in position. I'm playing an over better check strategy. Players telegraph their hand strength with their bet size, so we're gonna check here, see what happens, and it checks through. Turn is now a 7. Now the big blind comes out and leads for $40, and on an ace-high board where there is a flush draw out there, player. I am just not expecting this player to lead for this size if he has a strong ace. If he has a weak ace, well, we think we can get that hand to fold by the river. And this is most likely just going to be like Jack X type holdings or pocket nines or something like that. Never going to be a 7 either when he takes this size. So we're going to put in the big boy chunky raise now. We go 200, planning to pile in money on the river. We would like him to call right now if he has a hand like ace 6 or something like that. So that's why we choose this size. If he does have like a jack or whatever, he's just folding no matter what. But both players are going to fold. And someone says,
you want a heater, Mark?
all right, next hand here, under the gun limps, and we look down at the second best hand in all of poker, pocket aces. The hijack, cutoff, and button are going to call, and now, please, 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 look at that. The small blind is going to squeeze to $150, and when recreational players squeeze from the blinds, they are just very strong. We start off this hand very, very deep, about 2K effective or so. So I'm going to put in the 4-bet, and I'm going to choose a big size in position. Would never be choosing this size against a pro, but against a recreational player who's going to be massively under 3-betting and is just going to have a very, very strong range that I don't think is folding all that off into a 4-bet. I go big here. I go 500, and the button finally gets out of the way. Now the small blind is going to ask,
Never.
but unfortunately for us, the small blind is actually going to fold here. I'm a little bit shocked she found the fold. Maybe I gotta adjust here, and when players are super deep, when they're up money, maybe I do need to size down even against a very, very strong range. All right, next hand here, the straddle is on. The low jack is going to limp. The button limps. We go 90 here in the big blind with ace king offsuit, low jack and button call. So we're going 3 ways to a flop, which comes 8-7-4, and not really the flop you want to see when you have ace king. We are going to check. Now the low jack is going to check, and the button goes $40 here into 280. So whatever, we may have the best hand here at some frequency. We've got 2 overs. Probably our over cards are good. So we are going to call. Now the low jack is going to call 3 ways to the turn, which is a 3 of diamonds. We check again. The low jack checks, and now the button goes 30 into 400. I think there is maybe some case to be made for just check raising now, but we can also still have the best hand at a pretty high frequency. So we are going to call. Now the low jack is going to overcall once again. River is a 7, pairing the board. We check, and it checks through, and I kind of hesitantly flip over an ace here, and no one turns over anything better. So I show ace king, and we are good here with ace king high. So thank you, happy birthday to me. All right, next hand here. Not sure I'm in love with the way I played this one, but let's talk about it. Button goes 20, and we look down at ace king in the big blind and 3-bet to 115 here, just using a bigger size because we have seen this player be relatively sticky to 3-bets, especially in position. So he is going to call, heads up to a flop, which comes king 10-3, and I'm going to deviate. I actually don't think these king high boards get stabbed enough in 3-bet pots, and the reason why I usually check my range out of position is because they overstab, telegraph their hand strength with their sizing, and they do not protect their check back range, but I don't think they necessarily overstab quite as much, especially in a 3-bet pot on a king high board. So I'm just going to come out and bet here myself. I go 100, he calls. Turn is now a jack of diamonds, and here's where I think I made a mistake. I think I should just keep betting on this turn. I don't need to choose an egregiously large size. If he does have a better hand, he's going to let me know. And sometimes I do get value owned here by like jack 10 or whatever that just calls, but I think we can get value from enough hands here. This board is wet, lots of flush draws, lots of straight draws, lots of like pair plus straight draws. I think we should just keep betting here. We check. He goes 200 here, and we are going to call with top pair, top kicker. River is now a jack pairing the board, and at this point I think we have the best hand a lot of the time. Should maybe even consider coming out and just donking here to target a hand like king queen or king 9 suited or something like that. But we check, he checks it back, and of course we show, and we are good. Not in love with the way I play this hand. If I could do it over, would just keep betting on the turn and would follow through with a 3rd barrel on the river. Just bet, bet, bet here, I think plays best. All right, next hand here, there is a straddle on. We raise to $40 in the cutoff with queen jack of spades here. Now the small blind is going to 3-bet to 125. Once again, when recreational players 3-bet from the blinds, they're just massively under bluffing. Very, very strong range here. So we are going to call with a suited Broadway and play a pot heads up in position. So flop comes ace, 9, 5, pot is 260. Small blind bets 100 here. I think you would choose a bigger size a lot of the time with a hand like ace king or ace queen suited. So we're actually gonna float here. We've got 3 to a backdoor royal flush actually here. So a little bit going on here for us. We call, turn is a jack of diamonds. He checks it over. Not sure we have really any showdown value here. Probably should just be turning our hand into a bluff starting now, trying to get a hand like kings or queens to fold by the river. But then again, I'm not sure we really need 2 streets to do that. We can check back the turn, and if he checks the river, I think we can get kings or queens to fold almost all the time anyway. So don't hate the check back, but probably would just prefer a small bet here to get value from kings or queens and then get it to fold on the river. River is a queen of diamonds. He comes out now and bets 200, and I'm not really sure what I was thinking here. Like we talked about on the flop, if he did have ace king, we'd probably choose a larger size on the flop and just keep betting on the turn at a high frequency. So not really sure what I'm thinking. We raised to 450. He snap calls and he shows pocket aces actually. So he got a little bit sneaky. He bet on the flop and then he checked the turn. And I think I played this one very poorly. All right, next hand here, we raised to 25 under the gun with 6-5 of clubs. Hello. Early position player calls. Now the hijack 3 bets to 75. We're going to call here with a suited connector. We are going heads up to a flop, which comes ace jack 4 with a couple of clubs. We check it over and he actually checks it back. So I think he's probably just gonna have hands like kings and queens here actually quite a lot of the time. Turn now is an 8 of hearts. So we pick up a gut shot to go along with our flush draw. We check it over and he goes 125 here. Think players can just be monkey stabbing with kings and queens here, even for a relatively big size. The board is starting to get a little bit more wet. There's a flush draw out there. So at this point, I'm going to apply all the pressure, kind of like an awkward stack depth here in that we've only got about 825 effective here now. So we jam 825 effective. He snap calls, which, oops, we don't love to see that. So we're gonna need some help on the river, which is a 3 of spades, so it doesn't give us any help. And he actually has pocket aces for top set. So he got us here. He got us for the max, but still we got the turn in with reasonable equity, but I think I just prefer just betting the turn myself for the reasons why we talked about in the hand. All right, next hand here, the straddle is on. We raised to $40 in the cutoff with ace queen with the queen of spades. The small blind is going to call. The straddle's coming along as well. 3 ways to the flop, which comes ace 3 deuce with a couple of spades. Checks over to us. I'm gonna choose a bigger size here because I think on these ace high boards, people don't really call with their weak stuff or raise their strong stuff nearly as frequently as other boards. So we go 80 into 120. Small blind calls the next to act, which means he's probably gonna have a pretty strong hand here. And the straddle is going to fold heads up to the turn, which is the 10 of spades. He checks it over, and at this point, we are going to size down here to entice hands like weaker ace X to continue. So we want to make sure hands like ace 5 suited or ace 9 suited or something like that continue on this turn. So we size down to 100 into 280. He is going to call. All is going according to plan so far. Now the river is the 8 of spades. So we actually make the second nut flush here. And now when he checks it over to us, I'm pretty much targeting like the jack of spades or like a turned or rivered 2 pair, I guess, is pretty much it. So I go 350. As I'm reaching for chips, he says, I'm going to call anything you bet, which is a sign of weakness. They're trying to get you to do the opposite. They're trying to get you to check back. He just doesn't really have much. So I should actually probably size down here and just maybe go like 100, 150. And I put the bet in, he folds, and he says,
I love you, Mark.
All right, next hand here, the straddle is on. Hijack makes it 30, button calls. We have a slam dunk squeeze here in the small blind with pocket jack. So we go 150. And the hijack and button both call. 3 ways to a flop, which comes 7, 7, 3. I think this board is just going to get stabbed at a high frequency, but with the SPR being so small, maybe just coming out and betting small ourselves is better. Either way, we check here. Hijack checks. Button jams all in for 445 effective. And don't think the hijack really has a hand once he checks here, but either way, we are just going to put the money in ourselves. We rejam, and the hijack folds. We're all in, and he has ace 8 of diamonds, so please let us hold. The turn is a king of hearts, pretty good. River is a deuce of clubs, and we win a nice little pot against a bricked flush draw. All right, next hand here, straddle on again. We raise on the button with ace 8 offsuit 240. Small blind calls heads up to a flop, 8, 7, 3. We have top pair. He donks for $30 here. When players donk in single raise pots, heads up in position for small sizing, I'm just flatting my entire range because these donks are usually full of shit. So we are going to call. Turn is now a king of diamonds. At this point, he checks it over, and I'm actually going to bet, even on a flush completing turn, very, very small here for value. Just trying to get like a pair plus a diamond type hand to call here. I think we have the best hand a high percentage of the time. So we go $50 here. He's going to call. River is an offsuit 10, and now he donks for 120, which is less than half pot, so a very small size on this river. I have no clue what's going on here. It doesn't make any sense to me, and the size is very small on the river. We have a decent hand, so whatever. I flick in a call, and he actually shows queen deuce of diamonds, so he donked with a flush draw on the flop, check called when he got there on the turn, and then donked small again on the river. I mean, I guess good for him. He got me. I got absolutely owned in this hand. Let me explain. Cutoff makes it $20 here, and the cutoff is a pretty strong player playing for profit. There's a couple of recreational players in the blinds who we would like to keep in, so we're going to be doing a lot of flatting here and just 3-betting with a polar range here. So we would like to keep the weaker players in who are going to make a ton of mistakes. So this is one of the exceptions where I do flat when a stronger player opens and there are fish behind. So we're just going to call here with king queen. The big blind comes along as well. 10, 9, 7 with a couple of clubs, checks over to us, and with 2 overs and a gut shot here to the nuts, I'm going to start betting. I go $30. Big blind calls, cutoff gets out of the way, going to a turn which is the jack of hearts. Look at that sweet baby there. We make the nuts. He checks it over, and now I want to choose a size that's going to entice him to raise off when he does have a straight here, but also going to keep around his hands like flush draws and 2 pair and stuff like that. So I go small here on this turn. I go $60, and he snap calls. River is now a 3 of clubs, bringing in the front door flush, and when he snap calls on the turn, I think that's going to rule out straights. I think he just has a lot of 2 pair and maybe some flush draws, and so when he checks to us on the river, I'm going to try to get value against his 2 pair hands. I think the flushes would consider donking the river quite a bit once we go small on the flop and small on the turn, and so I'm just going to try to get value from the 2 pair. Don't think I can go too big here when the flush comes in. I go 100 into 240, and he snap calls again, and he actually flips over queen 8 of diamonds. What? He did not raise the turn, and this just like, it throws my head for a loop here because the whole strategy is get them to raise off their straights on the turn and get them to call with it, and he just didn't raise, and I'm really dumbfounded here. And so the adjustment against players like this who are going to be very, very passive, when we have strong hands, we can't count on him to raise his second best hands, and so this is going to be the rare player type. We just have to pile in big bets when we have a strong hand. Right? It's really that simple, the adjustment against super passive, trappy, scared players. All right, next hand here. I have demonstrated how good bluffing is even in 3-bet pots by accident in this hand. Let me explain. EP makes it 25, and we're in the cutoff with king queen. We 3-bet to 60. Like to play pots, heads up in position against recreational players. So that's what we do. We 3-bet to get a heads up. He's going to call. Flop comes queen 8-5. He checks it over. Going to c-bet my entire range here. Small. I go $50. Quick call from him. Turn is now a 5, pairing the board. And on these paired boards, I think they're pretty bad spots to bluff. People get a little bit sticky. Queen high boards, pretty bad spots to bluff in 3-bet pots. So I'm going to size up here. I go big, setting up less than 1 SPR for the river. And I just don't think he's folding a hand like jacks or 10s or even like 8x here on the turn when the board pairs on a queen high board in a 3-bet pot. I go 200. He quickly calls. River's now in offsuit 7. And once again, we want to get value here on this river from jacks, 10s, 9s. If I was bluffing in this spot, I would hate it. I probably would not bluff on this river for the all-in size. I may just go small here to try to get like ace high flush draws to fold if I was bluffing. So seems like a bad spot to bluff, good spot to go for value to me, I guess, if my calibration is correct, which I guess this session it has not been. So I jam for 485 effective, targeting, queen jack, queen 10, pocket jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 9s, even a sticky non-believing 8x. And now he goes into the tank, and I ask him what he has.
What do you have? Ace queen. You have ace queen, and you're thinking about it? That's insane.
Well, if he has ace queen, how does ace queen? He's thinking about, he's tanking with ace queen. And now I shift somehow from like wanting him to call to wanting him to fold. What is going on here? Eventually he's going to put in the money. He does have ace queen. This is a spot that is a horrible spot to bluff. When the board pairs, people just call more than they call on the unpaired boards. Queen high boards in 3-bet pots, people just call more. SPR less than 1 on the river, people just call more. And this guy was still considering folding top pair, top kicker in a 3-bet pot for less than a pot size shove on the river. It just shows, guys, that like people are just folding, and the way to up your win rate is to probably in a lot of 2-5 or 5-5 games around the country is to massively turn up the bluffing frequency and just bet slightly less thin for value. I'm still happy with how I played this one, unlike quite a few of the previous hands, but just a nice little lesson to take away here. All right, next hand here. This guy's actually playing out of the rack, and he's about to stand up. He's playing his last 2 or 3 hands here, and he's up a lot. He's trying to book a W, so I think he's going to be pretty risk averse here. So a couple notes before we start the hand. And he raises to 20 in the low jack. The cutoff calls. We're in the big blind with 8-5 of diamonds. We come along. Flop comes king 5-5. How beautiful is that? We check. The low jack goes 20 and folds over to us, and we are going to check raise big here. Just thinking on the flop, if he does have a hand, obviously like ace king or king queen, those hands are not folding right now for 1 bet.
I don't have anything, but I don't think you're gonna call because you're racking up.
He is going to call. Turn is now an offsuit 6. We would love to keep in all of the king X, king jack, king queen, ace king, obviously, so we can't go absolutely huge here. I think if we were playing against some more sticky players, someone who was stuck, someone who was tilted, someone who was not about to leave, we could go bigger here. So I go 250, just trying to get max value against those hands. Don't want them to fold. He is going to call. We're going to a river, which is an ace. This card could go either way here. Like if he does have a hand like king queen or king jack, even though the ace doesn't really change anything in recreational players' minds, it does downgrade their hand. So I think I would have to go pretty small here on this river to get king jack or king queen to call. So 2 options here. I think maybe just going like 300, like 40% pot on this river could be decent to target like king queen or king jack, or we could go for gold against the ace king here and just go very, very large. I don't think top 2 is ever folding. I go 700 here. I do think if the dynamic wasn't going on with a player with his chips in the rack and about to leave, I could go much bigger here, like 1,000, 1,200, something like that. But because of the previous dynamic, because of the meta we talked about, I do think I have to size down. I think they're going to be more risk averse in the spot, even with ace king. So we put in 700 and then we start talking.
Think about this very carefully because this could make or break your session today. I don't want you to make the wrong decision. But right now I'm a little nervous. I'm not too nervous.
Unfortunately for us, after some tanking, he is going to find the fold and say he would have snapped if he had ace king. So we don't seem to be making the best decisions thus far today. All right, next hand here, quick one, but a fun one. The straddle is on. The cutoff limps. We are going to complete in the big blind here with jack 10. The straddle now ISOs to 35, which is a very small size. The cutoff calls, and we're gonna call here, a little bit speculative, but we're going to a flop. Jack 10, 9. Pretty good for us. We check, straddle goes 40, cutoff folds. We check raise to 125. No need to go big here. He's only got about 285 behind. So he is going to call here. Turn is now the innocuous 4 of clubs. We put them all in for about 160. He calls, and going to the river, offsuit 5. We show we are good. All right, so here is a follow-up pot showing the adjustments I made against that passive player, if you recall earlier, who just called us down and never raised when he had the second nut straight. He is going to limp from early position. We're on the button with jack 5 of hearts. This is a super, super light ISO, but we think this player is on the weaker side. We'd like to get it heads up in position, so we make the speculative ISO to 30. He calls 10, 9, 8. He checks it over, and I'm gonna go very, very small here to see if we just can't force him to raise off his stronger stuff on this flop. So I go 20 instead of my usual half pot. He puts in a quick call. Turn is now a queen of spades, so we make a straight here. Now when he checks it over, again, no reason to choose a small size here. We already know he's not raising off his stronger stuff, and we have the stronger stuff here, right? I mean, if he raises, he just has a jack, or he has king jack, which we lose to, so no reason to go smaller. The adjustment is just to size up, put the money in for him, because this guy is not going to put money in for us. So we go 100 into 105, just targeting 2 pair and flush draws here. He calls quickly. River is now an offsuit 6. And at this point, when he checks it over, I'm just targeting 2 pair on this river. Now, there is a 1-liner to a 7, a 1-liner to a jack, so I don't think we can get egregious here with our sizing. We go 150, he puts in a quick call, we show, and we are good. So happy we made the adjustments against his player and started just putting in money for him, knowing that he's not going to put in money for us. All right, next hand here, just another example of how I like to construct my pre-flop range when the only other strong player at the table opens. So in this hand, the EP player goes $20. We look down at pocket queens, and he is definitely a winning player, paying attention, playing well post-flop. Every other player at the table is a recreational player. And so when he opens from early position, I'm actually gonna make a flat here with pocket queens. Now, I would be 3-betting with aces and kings and ace-king suited here all the time. Very, very top of my range. And I'm actually going to be 3-betting a polar range here. Flop comes 10-9-7. He bets $20 here. We are going to call. Turn is now an offsuit 5. He goes 55 at this point. Don't think we have the best hand quite a lot, but it's too thin to raise. So we are going to call again. Now the river is an 8, bringing in a 1-liner to a straight. And this is an aware player like we talked about. And on the flop, on a board that is not good for him, he double barreled on this board. Now it brings in a 1-liner to a straight. We can just have a jack here a lot. We can just have queen jack here a lot. And he bets 150 on this river. This is just very strong. I mean, he'd have to be just going absolutely crazy with a hand like king queen here, queen 9 suited or something like that into a bluff. Like, there's just no bluffs here. So yes, we have a strong hand, but this is just massively under bluffed, triple barreled. The 1-liner comes in on the river. He bets again. Strong player. He knows what's going on. So we are just going to make a disrespectful fold here on this river. All right, last hand of the session here. The straddle is on. Hijack limps, and we look down at queen 10 offsuit in the small blind here. This is a light ISO, yes, but there is a lot of dead money out there. So we're going for it. We go $90, and the big blind's actually going to call. So a stronger range from the big blind here, who cold calls the ISO than if the hijack had called. So we're going heads up to a flop. King 7-4 rainbow. And as is my MO, out of position, I'm going to check my entire range. I check, he checks it back. Turn is now a 6 of diamonds here. And at this point on a straightening turn where he can turn, you know, a lot of strong hands here. He could certainly turn some 2-pair. He could turn some pair plus straight draw. I'm just going to bet small here with a hand that is complete air. I would like for him to stick around with ace highs, with hands like pocket 9s, stuff like that, which we can get to call once and then fold on the river. I want to keep his range wide and weak here. I would not be choosing the size if the turn was a blank, because I think he would be much more capped. But on a turn that changes the nuts, that is a little bit more dynamic, I am going to size down, because the more equity in our hand we have, the less fold equity we need. Well, we just have no equity in our hands. So we need a lot of fold equity, and I'm not sure on this turn card we have a lot. So we go $80, just going small here, but fortunately for us, he is going to fold.
All right, guys, I actually snuck 2 sessions in there. Please forgive me. The first session was very short, so I didn't want to do a whole outro dedicated to it. But first session, played about 3.5 hours, made just under 600. Second session, which we just wrapped up, played a pretty long one, about 11.5 hours, but only made a couple $100. So overall, about 15 hours, up about 800. We are still on pace, averaging just over 150 bucks an hour or something like that right now. Marco will put the numbers nicely right over here for you guys, but feeling pretty good so far, and have hit the 100-hour threshold and plan to keep on going, and we'll see how long we can do this till I want to shoot myself in the head.